Today I'm going to tell you how one decision stopped this couple from ever moving forward in life. What happened that day changed everything, and they never saw the outside world again. It was Maya and Bobsy's wedding anniversary. To celebrate, they went on a short trip that started by the ocean. They planned to spend some quiet time together and then head to their next destination. But while they were out there, Maya noticed a beautiful island in the distance. She really wanted to go explore it. Bobsy didn't feel like going, but because it was their special day, he agreed. He thought, let's try something new. They had no idea this choice would change their lives. They put their small rubber boat into the water and began paddling toward the island. As soon as they stepped onto the land, they realized that things can look much nicer from far away. Up close, the island was empty and barren. There was nothing but dry land and silence everywhere. Maya said, "Since we're here already, let's explore properly. Otherwise, it feels pointless to have come all this way." So they started walking around the island. While exploring, they found some old rusted machines. Looking at them, they guessed that traders might have worked here long ago, moving big shipments. Or maybe scientists had been doing research and left their equipment behind. What do you think it was? They climbed to the highest point of the island and took some photos. After spending a while enjoying the quiet, Bobsy noticed the sky getting dark. He wondered if a big storm was coming. Worried, Bobsy decided it was time to leave. But when they pushed their small boat back into the sea and started rowing, they quickly lost their sense of direction. Within moments, the storm grew strong. If they stayed in the water any longer, they risked being swept away. So they turned back to the island for safety. For now, that was the only right choice, but it meant they had no choice except to spend the night on that deserted island. They built a small shelter in one corner of the island and spent the whole night there, keeping a small fire burning. But the next morning turned out to be even harder for them. When they looked out to the sea, they were shocked. Their boat was gone. Maya thought that maybe Bobsy had forgotten to drop the anchor because they were in such a hurry. But Bobsy was sure he had anchored it. He guessed that the boat might have drifted away during the terrible storm in the night. They decided to search for it using their little backup boat. But even after rowing a long distance in every direction, they didn't find anything. They couldn't spot the boat no matter how hard they looked. Maybe Maya had been right all along. But Bobsy still couldn't accept that he had made such a big mistake. While searching, he realized that the diesel in their small boat was almost finished. He quickly turned off the motor and started pedaling to save fuel. It became clear that instead of risking getting lost deeper into the ocean, it would be safer to go back to the island and wait for help. They turned their boat around. By then, they were feeling hungry and thirsty. Their biggest challenge now was simply staying alive. They climbed to the highest point of the island, hoping they might see some sign of help or passing ships. But there was nothing anywhere, just empty sea in every direction. Then they spotted something, clear water trickling from a rock. They quickly drank as much as they could, finally quenching 2 days of thirst. Nearby, they found some fish, which they caught and ate. That gave them a little strength back. After this, they realized that if they wanted to be rescued, they had to do something to get noticed. If any boat passed by, they would need to see a signal. So they started working right away, collecting pieces of wood and arranging them into a big SOS sign on the ground. But without a phone or any radio, they couldn't contact anyone. All they could do was wait. Whether it would take a month, a year, or even a lifetime, they had no choice but to keep trying. They knew that giving up would mean dying slowly on that lonely island. So they found some old cans left in a rusted cage nearby. They filled them with water to store for later. One day, while exploring the island again, Bobsy climbed up the hill behind their little shelter. There he found something that made his heart heavy. 3 old graves were sitting quietly on the hilltop, almost hidden by the grass and stones. It was clear that people had once lived here and had died here too. Maybe they were trapped in the same way as Bobsy and Maya. Maybe no one ever came to save them. Time kept moving slowly, as if it was stuck. The days turned into nights, then into afternoons, then back into days. But nothing ever changed. No help came. No sign that the world even knew they were here. Their bodies were growing weaker every day because there was hardly any food to eat. Bobsy tried to keep hope alive. He held Maya's hand and told her they must stay strong. He said this was a big test, and if they kept fighting, better days would surely come. But Maya's heart was tired. His words did not give her any real strength anymore. She felt empty inside. One afternoon, while gathering dry sticks, Maya suddenly fainted and fell to the ground. Bobsy ran to her side, lifted her carefully, and carried her back to the small hut. He sat with her all night, thinking deeply about what to do. He knew one thing for sure. They could not keep sitting here doing nothing. If they did, hunger would kill them. By morning, he had made up his mind. He picked up the sharp tool he had made out of a piece of metal. When Maya was feeling a little better, he helped her walk to the other side of the island. Over there, a big group of penguins had gathered near the rocks. Bobsy looked at them, knowing exactly what he needed to do. Maya shook her head and begged him not to harm the birds. She could not bear the idea of killing another creature just to survive, but Bobsy knew there was no other choice. If he didn't act now, they would both die from hunger and weakness. With a heavy heart, he caught a penguin. That day, for the first time in many days, they had fresh food to eat. Eating the meat brought some life back into their bodies. They felt a little stronger. They also found water nearby, and for a short while it seemed like their struggle was finally becoming easier. But even with food and water, their hearts were never at peace. Every day they sat waiting and watching the sea, hoping to spot a ship or some sign of rescue. Days passed, nothing changed. Hope started to fade again. One morning, Bobsy and Maya went back to the same place where they had seen the penguins. But now the rocks were empty and silent. Not a single penguin was there. Maya's eyes filled with tears. The little hope she still held on to broke apart. She turned to Bobsy and said in a trembling voice that maybe they should try going back into the sea. Maybe if they were lucky, a passing ship would see them and save them. But Bobsy shook his head. He could not agree to that. Out on the sea, there would be no food, no clean water, and no clear direction. There were too many dangers they could not see coming. Here at least they had shelter and a chance to stay alive. But Maya was truly afraid now. Over and over, dark thoughts kept coming to her mind. She feared that something terrible would happen to her, or that one day she would simply die of hunger while waiting for help that would never come. Meanwhile, all of a sudden, they saw the light of a ship far out on the water. Their hearts started beating fast with hope. They ran as fast as they could to the shore and began shouting and waving their arms. But shouting was useless, like people on the moon trying to call out to people on Earth. No one could hear them. They knew they needed to do more. If they had lit a fire or made smoke signals, maybe someone on the ship would have noticed them. Quickly, Maya started trying to build a fire. She gathered dry grass and sticks, her hands shaking. But before she could finish, Bobsy made a sudden decision. He jumped into the sea with their small boat. He shouted back to Maya that he was going to row closer to the ship so someone would see him and rescue them. Maya screamed after him, begging him to come back. She was scared. The sea was dark and dangerous. But Bobsy didn't listen. He felt this was their only chance and he couldn't let it slip away. He started paddling fast, determined to reach help. He kept going and going until he was far from the island. But then, what they feared happened. The small boat ran out of fuel and slowed to a stop. Bobsy tried everything, but the boat wouldn't move anymore. He had come a long way, but he was still too far from the ship. All his hope faded in that moment. There was nothing he could do. Maya stood on the shore, watching helplessly as her husband drifted alone in the dark sea. He didn't return. Her heart felt like it was breaking apart. She was all alone now, with no idea what to do next. But she knew she couldn't stay there crying forever. So she walked back slowly to their little hut and fell to her knees, praying with all her heart for help. In the morning, Maya heard a knock on the door of the hut. Her heart started racing. When she opened the door, she couldn't believe her eyes. Bobsy was standing there. He looked hurt and tired, but he was alive. She ran to him and hugged him tightly, tears rolling down her cheeks. She helped him inside and made him sit down carefully. Bobsy took a deep breath and began to tell her what had happened. On his way back, his small boat had been hit by a huge wave. It couldn't handle the force and sank. In the chaos, he hit a sharp rock, badly injuring his leg. But even then, he did not give up. He used all his strength to swim back to the island. Now that he was safe, the pain in his leg became too much to bear. Maya helped him lie down on the mat. She knew she had to do something to stop the bleeding, so she heated the knife over the fire and pressed it on the wound to seal it. The pain was so terrible that Bobsy screamed and then passed out. As she looked at him lying there, Maya understood that from now on, everything was on her shoulders. Bobsy would not be able to walk or help for a while. She would have to find food, bring water, and keep them both alive. When Bobsy woke up the next morning, his face was pale, and he could barely speak. He told her he never meant to leave her alone. He knew this would make things even harder for her. But Maya held his hand and said softly that he should not worry. She promised she would take care of everything. Time started moving slowly again. Day after day passed. Maybe you wouldn't even notice if you were just watching from far away. But they spent more than a month like this, just the two of them on that lonely island, depending only on each other. And that is why I said at the beginning, one decision they made, to step onto this island, changed everything. It was the moment their time seemed to stop. One day, Maya went outside to gather some things they needed. As she looked out toward the mountains in the distance, she noticed something that filled her with worry. Snow had started covering the peaks. Winter was coming fast, and with it, the cold would become much worse. She knew this meant even more danger for both of them. She went back to the hut and told Bobsy that they should leave the island before the snow trapped them here forever. But Bobsy shook his head. His leg was still badly hurt, and he said he couldn't walk far. Maya nodded and said she understood. But deep inside, she knew this was not just a hard moment. It was a life or death situation. If they stayed here through the winter, they could freeze to death. She thought about how Bobsy had always struggled to make big decisions. That was why he hadn't caught the ship that day. She remembered that morning when she had begged him to go into the sea while the ship was still in sight. Maybe if he had listened, they would have been saved. But thinking about the past didn't help anymore. They needed to act. So that night, while Bobsy was sleeping, Maya made up her mind. She packed a few supplies, some food, a bit of water, and a blanket, and quietly stepped out into the cold darkness. She hoped that if she left now, she might find help and bring someone back to save them both. The moment she stepped outside, the freezing wind hit her face like knives. Everywhere she looked, there was only endless white snow stretching to the horizon. But Maya kept walking. Her heart was set on one thought. She had to do something. This was her only chance. It was do or die. When night came again, she lay down on the snow itself to rest. The cold seeped into her bones, but she did not give up. As soon as morning light appeared, she forced herself to stand and walk again. Hours passed. Her legs were heavy, and her body was numb. There came a point when her strength finally gave out. She fell to her knees and whispered to herself that she couldn't go any further. But then, she picked up a handful of the icy snow and pressed it to her face. The freezing shock made her eyes open wide again. She knew she had no choice. She had to keep moving. After a long and painful journey of 3 days through the snow, Maya finally saw something in the distance. A red-colored building standing against the white land. She didn't know if it was a research center or just an empty shelter, but to her it looked like life itself. With her last bit of strength, she ran toward it and pushed the door open. Inside, there was no one. But to her relief, there was plenty of food stacked on shelves and warm clothes hanging on hooks. The first thing Maya did was clean herself up. She washed her face and hands, then ate until her stomach felt full for the first time in weeks. After resting a little, she walked all around the building, calling out, hoping to find someone. But the place was completely empty. However, she found something that made her heart leap with hope. A snowboat parked just outside. It felt like she had been given a second chance. She quickly gathered food, extra blankets, and supplies. As the sun began to set, she climbed onto the snowboat and started back toward the hut as fast as she could. When she finally arrived, it was already dark, but her joy turned to shock. A terrible storm had come while she was gone and destroyed the hut. The walls and roof had collapsed in a pile of broken wood and ice. Her heart almost stopped when she saw her husband lying there under the wreckage, his body completely frozen. Without wasting a moment, she dragged him out with all her strength and put him in the snowboat. Then she rushed back to the red building. Inside, she wrapped Bobsy in warm clothes and covered him with blankets. Slowly, as the hours passed, his body began to warm up. Little by little, he started to breathe better, and his skin got some color again. When he opened his eyes, Maya felt relief so deep she began to cry. Now they were safe. They had shelter, food, and heat. Bobsy grew stronger each day until finally he could stand on his own again. One night, feeling alive and hopeful, the two of them danced together under the dim lights. Then after 42 long days on that island, the moment they had been waiting for finally came. A team of scientists arrived at the building. It was real. Help had finally come. Maya ran to Bobsy and hugged him tightly. They both knew that now everything would be all right. And with that, their story comes to an end.